yeah, welcome everyone to the potentially first of several unofficial Uniswap community calls. Um, just so everyone's aware, the meeting will be recorded, or it is being recorded. Um, so yeah, two-party consent, everyone should just be aware of that. Um, and I'll be posting the recording later in the Uniswap forum. Um, just some general ground rules for the meeting. Um, Kind of following from the Uniswap just community ethos and the forum guidelines. Um, Participation is definitely encouraged. I don't want to just be hearing myself speak on this call, hopefully, um, but we should just try and, as best we can, have one person speaking at a time. Um, Definitely treat everyone with respect. I'm sure we'll disagree about stuff, but um, try and just keep everything as civil as possible. Um, and I do have the ability to boot people, so hopefully won't get to that. But if anybody is being disruptive, you'll be removed from the meeting. Um, and then I wasn't able to lock down any presenters today. I think just the stars didn't align with timing for a couple people I was in touch with. But if somebody ever does want to present, um, again, my Zoom license is kind of limited, so you'll need to just send the whatever you want to present to me, or just put it in the chat, and then I can go through the slides or what have you for you. Um, so with that being said, we still have a few people joining. For those that just recently joined, just be aware again that this is being recorded so we can share it with the rest of the community later. Um, and I'd posted a just kind of a brief agenda of stuff that I thought was interesting that I wanted to talk about. Totally open to kind of shift from the agenda for whatever people want to discuss on the call. Um, but I think to start off, I'll talk a little bit more and just do a brief look back on Uniswap governance so far, what's happened. So far there have been two proposals. Both of them were submitted by Dharma. The first proposal was to reduce the quorum and proposal thresholds to submit something to governance from 40 million to 30 million uni for the quorum, and then 10 million to 3 million for the proposal thresholds. Um, that proposal failed to pass due to not meeting quorum. And then the second proposal was a retroactive airdrop to some people who had interacted with Uniswap but didn't end up receiving the initial airdrop when it was first launched. That as well failed to pass due to not meeting quorum. Um, so yeah, that's kind of a look back for governance so far. Um, Looking forward, there hasn't been any proposals submitted yet. Um, None that are really like clearly on the docket for everyone, um, but we'll see how that progresses over time. And so yeah, that's kind of just like the governance summary. Um, and then one other thing I wanted to talk about before we get into just kind of more open discussion is the community governance process. I linked it in the agenda, but um, I'll put it in the chat here as well. This was just posted by Ashley, Uniswap team member, a couple weeks ago, and was kind of like a suggested soft governance process for the community to kind of build consensus around stuff before we actually get to the point of submitting a proposal and voting on it. Um, so it's a three-step process. The first step is called temperature check, and basically it's trying to use the forum and then also snapshot the sort of off-chain voting tool to address kind of an open-ended issue or problem, and then see what sort of solutions the community think would be best for it. The second step is called consensus check, and if in that first temperature check phase, the community identified something and kind of agreed that something is a good path forward, the consensus check is basically deciding whether or not the community is really in support of that proposed idea. So that also involves more discussion on the forum, and then using the snapshot sort of soft voting tool. And then if both of those are kind of leading to consensus from the community to take action, then phase 3 would be a full governance proposal. So kind of like what Dharma had done earlier with proposals 1 and 2, actually submitting it to uni voters. Typically that would take 10 million uni to sponsor it, but there is also the possibility of doing an autonomous proposal where you can start it with a smaller amount and then have people delegate to your proposal to bring it over that 10 million. So that's kind of just a brief read through of the community governance process. Does anybody have any questions about that, or ideas about like changing it, or just any comments? And I'm going to lean into the awkward silences here just to make sure everyone has a chance to speak. So definitely hop in.
When there is this many people, like usually silence means affirmation. So like no, in this case, I guess there are no questions.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
How much governance does the uni team have, and are they refraining from voting?
If somebody from the uni team wants to pop in and comment on that, definitely welcome to. I would encourage everyone to read the Uniswap blog, which it's linked in the agenda. It's under the liquidity mining agenda item where it says current program. And that kind of says how much basically like of the uni supply was going to the team and what their vesting schedule is. My take was that I think they said that they might delegate to community members, but they're not planning on like actively voting themselves, and they don't want to be kind of like they don't want to be calling the shots for governance. Anybody on the uni team though, feel free to hop in.
Hi there. If the question was, are Uniswap team members participating in governance, the answer there is no. So we are currently permitted to delegate our tokens to various delegates under the condition that there is no prior, communication or coordination with those delegates around various governance topics. And yeah, as Monet Supply referenced, you should check out the blog post just to get a sense as to the distribution of tokens amongst team members, advisors, investors, and the community.
Is it cool if I jump in here and ask a quick question?
Please, yes.
And so, Matteo, thanks so much for joining the call. It's cool to have like a face-to-face with an actual Uniswap team member, because I just have my own like hypotheses with never really knowing what you guys are thinking. I mean, you're the head of strategy at Uniswap, so I'd be curious. Obviously, this liquidity mining ending on November 17th is going to have some effect on the protocol. We saw like the attack from some Sushi Swap. What are some of the internal discussions about November 17th? And I can't predict what's going to happen, but what are some of the topics that are on your mind there at the Uniswap office?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I can't really comment on that. Again, any decision related to liquidity mining has to be made by community members rather than the Uniswap team ourselves.
Sure, and that's fine. And I realize not like a discussion on liquidity mining itself, and I know you have to be careful with what you say, but like, I mean, a lot of the liquidity could leave Uniswap. I mean, I would or maybe someone else can answer that's not that's just more informed than I am. But like, what are other people's community thoughts about this? Like, a lot of probably ETH WBTC leaving, and incentivizing people to keep using Uniswap and locking liquidity there. I'd be curious to anyone's thoughts on that.
Talking about the liquidity mining program like ending shortly.
Yeah, well, to clarify, I mean, not just, I'm talking about overall liquidity locked up in Uniswap. I think it's about maybe 4 or 5x SushiSwap right now. I haven't checked in a few days, so I could be off. But just making sure that a lot of liquidity stays and Uniswap stays as the kind of the leading DEX AMM.
Yeah, I mean, one, like, just kind of riffing here, one advantage I see for Uniswap is that, like, that's kind of the landing point for a lot of new users. So, like, Uniswap captures a lot of volume just through its UI, which is a like kind of a weird competitive benefit over like a Moniswap or a SushiSwap, where people don't like really like seek out that like platform specifically, or users don't necessarily as much. So I think there's like a little bit of just like a natural advantage there, but it's interesting to think about.
Hi, sorry. Just wanted to share my thoughts. Wouldn't you agree that now that the game is based on incentives, that tomorrow or once the incentives end, MetaMask, for instance, can come up with their own token, right? FTX can, well, they have their own token, right? But 1inch can come up with their own token, start incentivizing liquidity providers, and then all of a sudden, I guess what the gentleman that was asking a question, that's what he meant, right? That all of a sudden, when when it's so easy to create a token, and all of a sudden the market just has to believe in it, right? Then essentially, when you're giving, you can too give it away, and then all of the players are gonna move, right? I guess that was his concern, right? I'm curious.
Yeah. In my opinion, that's like a big oversimplification of the whole matter, because if you have a subsidy or an incentive for liquidity on the platform, someone has to be paying for that. And doesn't matter if it's SushiSwap or Uniswap. In this case, Uniswap token holders are the ones that are subsidizing this liquidity. But I'm honestly not sure if the liquidity is one of the strongest points of Uniswap. As Monet Supply was saying, if you look at the DEX statistics, you will see that Uniswap is leading on unique number of traders. And I am willing to bet that that has absolutely nothing to do with the liquidity mining program. And it's a really big expense for any team that wants to do this kind of model. So I'm not sure if the threat of another team trying to subsidize their own system in order to get ahead of Uniswap is so big right now, because the model has been proven to have a lot of weak points.
I guess the concern here is that the barriers of entry sort of to replicate this thing are very low, right? The smart contracts of Uniswap are sort of public, right? The interface is on GitHub, right? So that's how SushiSwap is able to probably replicate everything and launch in one day, right?
Yeah.
So SushiSwap has demonstrated that I mean, they have taken away the volumes and the liquidity for some time, right? And I think that was before Uniswap came up with their own token, right? So then Uniswap was able to get back the leader position, right? But that can all. I mean, I guess the point here is that SushiSwap was able to demonstrate that it was kind of a very easy to do, right? And I guess that's the concern here.
Well, one thing I want to add to everyone, I think we should focus on. Greg put it into the chat. We should focus on integrations. I don't know if Mateo wants to say something about that, but before you go on, I think this is also not just SushiSwap, which their competition, but it's also a bet on Mateo. It's bet on Hayden and the Uniswap team that they can deliver Uniswap v3, and people have trust the smart contracts are going to work. And people have been burned by going to different liquidity mining places already. So I'm not too worried about all of a sudden someone's going to go through it. But I'd love if you're allowed to, Matteo, tell us like any integrations that you're working on or your BD team, just so we can figure out where everybody here, 100 people, was great participating, where your BD team is for integrations.
Yeah, so I really hate to be that guy, but I think for this call, I'm just going to try and be as passive an observer as possible. So yeah, unfortunately, I can't really disclose any information there.
Yeah, I'd want to just hop in as well, where I think I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily like good to like think of Uniswap or the Uni token as like a bet on the Uniswap core team. Like obviously Uniswap V1 and V2 are stuff that the core team had made with, it's a great product. We all love it. It's super innovative, but I think that we can also like view the community itself that we're building and that has already kind of coalesced around Uniswap as a sort of like a competitive advantage. Sushi Swap, there are people who are really committed and working on it. I assume there's like some community involvement in a lot of these other DEX protocols, but I think that Uniswap has a level of traction and mind share that is it's pretty high. I think people are really focused and
I would agree. We can't even fit we have 100 people on this call, so that's fantastic.
I wanted to FFF, they had raised their hand a little while ago. If you still had a comment or a question or wanted to speak up for a sec. All right, I think we can move on.
I do have a question if it's okay to jump in.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at the stats, for example, Uniswap's market share, even before like the liquidity mining started, was 58%, and it's somewhere a bit above that now. And I don't really like see from the data necessarily that there's a lot more liquidity on the trading pairs that are being incentivized, but it's not like I think that has really, really positively impacted like Uniswap itself. And I think I would be interested in hearing maybe like if there's I haven't been following that closely, but if there've been discussions about in the community about like other proposals or like other things besides the current liquidity mining program that would be interesting to know about and sort of analyze.
As far as like other non-liquidity mining related stuff, there was one thing I saw on the forum that I just wanted to surface from forum user Mr. Poe, which was kind of interesting. It was kind of like an idea for a grants program. Let me see if I can find it and put it in the chat. So yeah, that was interesting. I think trying to figure out ways to like fund the community to build interesting stuff, which is another. It's a way that Uniswap can use the treasury that isn't just paying for liquidity incentives. So yeah, for anyone who on the call who hasn't read this yet, definitely encourage you. It's kind of an early idea, but it's pretty interesting.
Just so I can quickly get back on replying to the gentleman about the percentage of liquidity locked besides the incentives. So just FYI, 2.3 billion is locked in the incentivized pairs versus 3.25 in total, right? So that's about 66%, FYI.
Yeah, that's a great metric. Thank you for sharing. Let me actually, if we could give 0xMaki the floor for a second, and then also if anyone else is finding it tough to hop in, feel free to use the hand raise feature as well. But yeah, let's give the floor to 0xMaki.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Monet, for organizing the governance call. It's very nice and appreciated. Thank you for some of the Uniswap team attending also, and the broader Uniswap community. I'd like to just drop in and say a little word. There's no attack from Sushi Swap. I think it was just like a lot of proving some dynamics that could happen in the space. I do think that people need to understand in the community, like, guys, you need to stop relying on Matteo or like the Uniswap team and just take leadership here. I think you guys should come up with, if you want to keep doing like a liquidity mining incentive, just spin up something. And I'm very not worried, but like I was expecting someone to actually come up with something today, because I think you guys have like a very big moat with this program right now. People trust Uniswap, people trust the Uni token, and that's why, you know, like seemingly like 1.5 billion is locked in like these 3-4 pairs that, you know, Uni started with. I think that liquidity mining is like a distribution model, and yes, it's going to be diluting Uni holders, but you guys should like think also like there's like a lot of developers that have been working with Uni for like the past year and more. You guys should think about like giving some grants, rewarding these dev, and maybe like, you know, I saw integration mining or of some sort. I think this is the way to go, guys. And I'm a very big fan of Uniswap. Been, you know, following the project since January 2019. And I think that, you know, stop relying on the leadership and just take ownership.
Yeah, +1 to that. I mean, Uniswap team's obviously great, and they are kind of an asset, but yeah, I think that's like a super awesome philosophy. Thank you for piping in.
Yeah, I agree a lot, but at the same time, I think that Uniswap has the lead on the truly innovating stuff in the DeFi space, and using the funds to incentivize more growth in that sense doesn't make direct sense. And if we take the approach that the Uniswap team is going to be focusing on building the product and like independently from the community, maybe we should think about funding a parallel or a B team that can work on more like dynamic and close to the community projects. But not something like, oh, let's incentivize Link or something like that. More like, let's build an Uniswap that works on Arbitrum or ZK Sync instead of like short patches for more liquidity. But we do need like a dedicated team if we want to go in that route.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Kind of ties in with that that earlier post I shared, which you know, it's kind of complicated to figure out how to pay people in a decentralized way. I guess I'll take this opportunity to shill another community that I hang out with, MakerDAO, which if you look over on their forum, they have a like an incentive program with SourceCred, where they're kind of like basically automatedly paying community members for contributions. So not to say that Uniswap should copy that, but just kind of food for thought. And yeah, I think that's one other thing that we can do with the treasury beyond just paying for liquidity. I guess one other thing I'd mention is that liquidity mining is not just it's not just paying for liquidity, but it's also a distribution mechanism of like trying to decentralize ownership. So I think that's something to be aware of, is that we're kind of slowing down that process if we don't continue the liquidity mining. Maybe be interested to hear people's thoughts on that.
Be interesting for us to step back and think, like, what has this liquidity program achieved for Uniswap? What has it achieved for the DeFi space as a whole? And think about whether we would have been able to achieve these without this program or not, and do we want to continue what has been achieved, and then from there, I think it will be easier to put forward a framework of whether the community wants to extend that or not. Based on what I work on, the project I lead WBTC here at BitGo, just looking at how this system basically changed the DeFi equilibrium, I think everyone who wants trading in crypto is looking at Bitcoin for their the trading venue that they choose. Before the liquidity incentives, trading Bitcoin on Uniswap was not very attractive. This has changed that a bit. The kind of implication of that is it makes Uniswap a trustable, a comfortable place for people who are not currently in DeFi to come on and trade. If we don't have deep liquidity for Bitcoin on Uniswap, it's hard to really go out there and convince new users to come and join. So that's kind of my 2 cents on why we should continue this incentive programs. I think it's amazing for acquiring users for Uniswap, and it will continue to do so.
Yeah, if I could say something.
Please.
So first of all, I'm glad to see a lot of the devs here. I really want to see how many devs would be involved in this call. I guess I have a question for everyone, and it's kind of touches on the notes that everyone brought up so far, which is before the liquidity mining, Uniswap was a very a go-to trading platform, a DEX for everyone. However, the liquidity mining, I guess what everyone's asking is, eventually the token supply will have to be distributed in some way. So rather than currently, if we just leave it, most of the supply will just continue going to the team, which is great, but at the same time, we want to decentralize the platform. I don't think in terms of competition, ending the liquidity mining incentives would affect the protocol. I think Uniswap will still be a go-to as it was before. But it's really a question to the community, like how would you like to see these tokens distributed? Because in the end of the day, it's the users that want to govern the protocol. So how would they want to see these tokens distributed? Do they want to see it in these 4 main pools, which I'd like to say they're pretty much whale pools at the way they are right now? Or how else would we want to see the tokens distributed so that everyone that is an everyday user of Uniswap has at least some say? And how do we address that? How do you work in a way that the token distribution isn't the main focus of everyone and the protocol, but at the same time, it engages all the likely users? And I guess that's my question to not just the devs, but to also like the community in general. Like, what is their vision on how this distribution will be optimal for the Ethereum community, and also in a sense that it doesn't become the focus of the protocol?
Thanks for hopping in. Yeah, that's great questions. I don't want to hog the airtime too much, but I guess for anyone who hasn't checked out Balancer's liquidity mining program, I would say take a look. It's a lot different than Uniswap's, but it's good to like learn from what others are doing. So definitely encourage everyone to just kind of see how that works. I think it's a little more broad-based. But yeah, if anyone else has any thoughts about kind of like the distribution aspect of liquidity mining, definitely feel free to hop in.
Can I? Okay. One thought about that is we are talking about distribution, but in my point is what creates more value for Uniswap in order to distribute or to invite more talent or to create more value to the project. So for me, probably it's not distribution all what is created, is what we can really distribute to people who add more value, create more value. It will be probably more people in the project involved. Probably will be more, I don't know if more volume or more money. I don't know if this really adds more value or not. But I think we have to think, in my opinion, what creates more value in order to distribute these tokens.
Yeah, I agree a lot with Jesus. Like, If we are thinking about the liquidity mining program as a distribution mechanism, that distribution mechanism will be like something that benefits the Ethereum holders or community in general, but actually this governance is more, at least the way I see it, it should be more intended to benefit the current uni holders. And these holders don't really have much incentive to distribute even more the token. Maybe it's like it's not really it's too much like self-centered or something like that. But I do think that it's not really it shouldn't be altruistic, the liquidity mining program.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. I think it's also kind of self-serving in a way to like invest in future growth. So I think that's something to be aware of, is like, if we distribute tokens, but it makes Uniswap just more valuable overall, we could still come out ahead even if we're, still holding. I guess I want to tie this off for a sec and then turn over the floor to Amadeo, who I think he wanted to talk about the fee switch for a sec.
Yes, hello there. Yeah, I want to know if the fee switch will be turned on, or what the planning is there after the uni mining stops, or what is the exact roadmap there. I get some mixed messages online, so it's not super clear.
That's great question. I guess for somebody who kind of knows like the technicalities of it, maybe even somebody from the uni team, I know that there's like some sort of like time lock on it, but I'm not sure exactly how that works. If somebody who knows how that works, if they want to pop in and just kind of explain the time lock and how to turn on the fee switch.
Yeah, I will. The fee switch cannot be toggled until it's somewhat next year. I'm trying to find the exact date. But yeah, we cannot do much about that. Like it's a fixed time lock. In the meantime, I think that we should think about what's the best thing to do, because like the fee is going to be like the opposite force that the liquidity mining program is going to make providing liquidity more expensive and less attractive, and it could make some other teams like fork Uniswap and remove the fee and try to siphon the liquidity that way. But yeah, like there is a time lock until next year, and we cannot do anything about that, I think.
Yeah, thank you for hopping in on that and sharing. I think so it sounds like we don't really have the ability as governance to turn that on for at least until next year sometime, but definitely still good to just think about and consider like when we might want to, or maybe reasons why we might not want to turn it on immediately once we can. So yeah, great discussion on that end. I guess
if I could just say something about the
please.
So in terms of the fee switch, I believe it's 180 days from the day the token released. So that's from September 18th, I think. So that's when the fee switch would be turned on. But I do believe that the process of introducing the fees would require a mechanism of a way to attain the fees from the protocol in some way by using the uni token in some way. Which this is my question also. How would you want, if and when, let's say whenever, it doesn't have to be even in 6 months, in a year from now, when the community decides to draw fees from the protocol, if they decide, is it going to be in the form of just the uni holders, or will it be as a uni liquidity provider? For example, we're seeing more and more where the governance isn't so well, it's controlled by the uni token, but the fees would be controlled by like the uni pair, like the uni ETH pair. Like what are people's opinion on how we would implement the fee mechanism when it does come, because it have to be implemented with a strategy. I don't think the fees would just you would turn on and automatically the token holders would start receiving fees, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah, I think that you know, there is a lot of work to be done. I guess if anybody else wants to speak on this as well, because Uniswap's fees, they're basically, it's like 0.05% of whatever token is being swapped. So it's probably going to be like a bunch, like small amounts of a bunch of random tokens that end up kind of accumulating. So not only is it like a method of like, how do we use that money, give it to uni stakers some other way, buy back and burn, but also like, how do we deal with accumulating a bunch of small tokens potentially?
One of the things, it is my understanding that the Uniswap team does not want to comment on these matters purely because they are afraid of legal problems, right? I'm very curious on whether anyone has done any research on whether, for instance, the token distribution or the burning, would that make the uni token a security token, right? Because to my understanding, that causes a lot, even more troubles where, you can't trade it anonymously or whatever, right? So I'm curious, where's the line between, the security token if we decide to somehow, distribute the rewards, right?
Yeah, I guess I feel like, considering that, like, presumably most of us are not lawyers, it's something to think about, but I'm not really sure that we gain much from like discussing it on the call. So I don't know, I might like kind of shift away from that a little bit. It is something to think about, but yeah, I guess that's kind of one of those like unknown unknowns, to copy a Rumsfeld quote. I don't know if anybody wants to like speak on that for a sec. My take is that just I don't necessarily think that that'll be the difference. Like Coinbase has listed Uni, a lot of other U.S. regulated exchanges, so it seems like others might be confident that it's not going to run into issues.
Yeah, maybe this is one of those topics that it shows that we do need like a parallel team or something like that, someone that can hire a lawyer and give this proper analysis. Or maybe we can try to find a lawyer on the community or a freelancer or something like that. But the blog post of the Uni token launch has a small section advising to seek legal advice before turning on the fee switch and do something about that. I guess that the Uniswap team has their own lawyers and they have concerns with that. But if we are going to go that route, we should get some professional help in that matter before taking any action.
Definitely agree on that.
Go
ahead.
I would assume most people want to continue the liquidity mining. My question would be, would it be on the same pairs or would it extend to other coins? Basically, would it be voted on or chosen?
guess to that point, kind of like turning back to the Uniswap community governance process. This will probably be how we figure that out. Is if people are interested in kind of leading the charge on figuring out the liquidity mining process, probably start off just by doing a kind of like a temperature check poll in the Uniswap forum, or a temperature check process, and you can kind of propose like unbiased questions about, should we reinstate the existing program as is? Should we change the amounts but leave the same incentive to pools? Should we make different incentivized pools? So yeah, I think that for anybody who wants to like get involved in kind of like making governance happen on the forums, definitely a great opportunity. I guess if anybody has thoughts about like any of those questions and they just want to say it on the call, though, great opportunity as well. So like, should we use the same pools? Should we do different ones? Same amounts or different?
I'll make a quick comment on just the logistics of getting something improved. I feel like it's difficult. I know you've laid out the 4-step process for getting something approved, but like Dharma, they're very well connected and they almost got something approved. So for average uni holders like myself and a lot of people on this call, like I feel like without some serious biz dev outside that and get some major whales involved, it's hard for a proposal that I would think like something like Uni ETH liquidity mining, for example, that most people favor. It would still be very difficult for it to be approved. So any ideas on how to like mobilize that? I know the Penguin Party is trying to do something, but that to me seems like a big roadblock. Even if most people want something, not being able to make it happen.
I think the compound governance system kind of showed that if you want to make something, if people want it and someone that's kind of a nobody proposes it, it will actually happen. So I've seen a couple of those over at Compound. So I don't think that's the issue. I think it's just discussing it, getting to the depth of the details of why this has to be. I think that's where we're missing. And I think that's what Maker Governance has done a tremendous job of over the years. So we can learn a lot there. And that's basically the framework Monet Supply is putting forth. So I'll try to make a post. I feel strongly that the ETH WBTC incentive program should be continued. So maybe it's upon us to make that a post on forum and ask people to participate.
Yeah, thank you for, yeah, I think if anybody has ideas on this, the floor is yours. And then it is kind of, it's kind of discouraging to think, oh, like, a big actor like Dharma couldn't get something passed. But those first 2 proposals, they were kind of contentious. There was a lot of support for them, but also some vocal opposition. So I think, yeah, you'll be surprised of how much support you do get from whales if you decide to just hop in the forums and start doing stuff. I've been super surprised by that in my time here. So yeah, I think definitely encourage everyone to just, see how they can contribute on this. One thing just to be aware of is that the liquidity incentives, they end in less than a week. If you were to follow through on that whole 3-step community governance process, probably looking at like 2 weeks at least, or maybe a little bit more. And that's, not even including time that it takes you to code up the proposal. So, it'll have some lead time in it. If we decide that we want to make some changes here, it'll definitely have some lead time.
Sorry, if I could just hop in there. So just to what Kiarash was saying, I second that strongly, that the WBTC pool should be incentivized and continue to be incentivized. Also, I would like to say that to Monet's point, the Dharma, especially the initial proposal, the second proposal was, or sorry, the one to distribute the a uni to Dharma proxy, the proxy contracts. Kind of that one was very contentious, and it would have diluted a lot of other uni holders at the time. So that one not making quorum, actually, the fact that they got that close to getting quorum was actually quite surprising for me personally. Which also underlines why the amount of uni that you need to pass a proposal is appropriate, in my opinion, because Uniswap is the biggest DEX, and for people to feel like they could put their liquidity in there with their mind at ease, they would probably want like a platform that can't be captured easily or can't be manipulated or altered. Actually, not even manipulated, just altered too easily. So in that sense, I think that's to Monet's point, that's why the Dharma proposal didn't pass, the two that he mentioned. But I think the WBTC ETH pool, the continued incentivization of that pool would pass pretty easily. I don't think it would be an issue, but like Monet said, if we were to pick up on it like right away and from today start the 3-step process, it probably still wouldn't be done in time, but it's definitely something to look into from even as we speak or when this call is done to really get the ball rolling on that one, because I just feel that offers the most value to the Ethereum community as a whole, and not just Uniswap, but all Uni users, to have that WBTC pool continue to be incentivized for just Bitcoin people that they just don't want, like they get their Bitcoin diluted into ETH and they get subsidized for it to some extent with the Uni token, which is fair. But I think it's all fair because we want the wrap Bitcoin accessible and liquid on Uniswap. So that's just my opinion on it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I guess it's almost interesting from just like a purely like data standpoint. Like we'll have this cool data set of like what happens when you take incentives away for a little while. So we'll, in a couple of days, we'll be able to see what impact it has on liquidity and slippage for different trade sizes. But, I think depending on that, yeah, we might kind of figure out that we want to do it again or change it maybe based on that info. OxMaki had his hand up for a sec, so let me turn over to him and then over to Kairash afterwards.
Yeah, so I'd like to add, one of my takeaway, I guess, from the call so far is that the community doesn't have like a clear direction. I think that this should be solved by maybe Matteo or the team, like opening up like the short midterm roadmap. I guess we all know that Uniswap V3 is in the work and it's going to be very interesting to see come up. I'd like to just make a statement. SushiSwap is not going to fork Uniswap V3 at all. We're going to do our own path from here. So this shouldn't be a worry, maybe for other like swap, clone or else. But I think that the faster you guys are open, the faster, I guess, community can prioritize what is good for the protocol and how to better help, I guess, the coordination. It's just a small takeaway that I think should be considered.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, since I have just kind of armchair opinion is that, the Uniswap team is probably, I don't know, I think they don't want to be like directing the community too much. So I think that's, it's just one of those kind of gray areas that us and the team and whole community, we're just going to be kind of like finding our way on that for a while. But yeah, thank you for sharing OxMaki. And Kairash, did you want to hop in?
Sure, thank you. So before I jump into my point, Robert just pointed out in the chat that he feels strongly about incentivizing a stablecoin ETH pair. I wanted to echo that as well and invite people to check that out in the chat. But just going off of what OxMaki was saying, I think the one topic we've talked about the most here is actually the WBTC ETH pool. And it seems I've so far heard supportive opinion. So I wanted to invite someone who disagrees with that to come on, and we should hear their points. If anyone wants to oppose that specific pool, or yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I personally oppose like all the pools, even an uni ETH pool. I oppose any kind of farming. I think that farming is like a very short term patch to get more liquidity, but nothing more. And we have like far more efficient ways of getting users and liquidity and integrations and all of that. But I totally agree with Monet that we are going to have more data because either we want it or not, the liquidity mining program is going to end, and we are going to have at least a few weeks of data of what happens when there is no incentives and what happens with the whole ecosystem, not only Uniswap. And maybe with that data, I will change my mind. But right now, I think that we should totally focus on more long-term solutions. Because let's be realistic, we cannot keep the liquidity mining program forever. It's going to end eventually because we have a limited supply of unit that we can give away to liquidity providers. So we better be careful with that process. That's my opinion.
That's not true. It's always inflating the supply.
Well, yes, but do we want to like be constantly spending the inflating supply this way? It's like an spiral that we are going to end up just trying to spend all the tokens on liquidity and trying to get back that money in fees. I don't know. I feel like it's not the correct way of growing a project like Uniswap. Is at the end of the day, it's going to be a zero-sum game somewhere, and I don't know that I am not sure that we can extract value by just incentivizing with money. It's just my opinion.
If I could just add something, I think that in some way you have to distribute the tokens. So what way would you or anyone else that also has a similar view as you would see a fair distribution that doesn't involve liquidity mining? Because I also, to Robert's point, I think that the significance of the WBTC and the stablecoin pair to be incentivized is because these are people that use Uniswap to swap for ETH through stablecoins or through BTC. So they're very valuable in that they're using Uniswap, and there's enough liquidity for them to enter the Ethereum ecosystem through Uniswap, those pairs. That's my standpoint. So I'm interested to see how you think is a fair way to distribute the uni that doesn't involve liquidity mining.
Yeah, maybe the thing is that I don't think that we should distribute uni per se, because we have like a fairly fair distribution so far. Like the airdrop was a super big thing. A lot of people receive uni, and a lot of like historic LP providers and this current farming program too. I think that we already achieved like a good distribution.
I think there's maybe a counter argument that the team and the investors still own more than half of it if we were to stop distributing now, which there's an argument to be made that the community maybe shouldn't want that because maybe our concerns could get drowned out, possibly. And then another argument that the core team might not want that because for Uniswap to be successful, I think it has to achieve decentralization. It's never going to achieve long run success without it. So I guess that's maybe just like 2 cents of like a counter argument where like even giving away tokens might be EV positive for people who are currently owning Uniswap, maybe.
Yeah, of course. I'm not talking about like attessoring all the uni and don't do anything with that. I'm just saying that maybe we can achieve more by spending those tokens in development or research or something like that. And we are going to end up distributing those tokens anyway because those teams are going to hold uni or sell it or something like that, and that will increase the decentralization. At the same time, we are going to get more value because we are going to have more research built into the system and development, and maybe that's more valuable than the temporary liquidity bump that we can achieve with farming. But it's not distributing the token just for the sake of doing that. It's a means to an end, and that end must be improving the project and adding more features and growing the project in general.
I mean, if I could just say, I feel like there's like a negative connotation with the yield farming, or like that that it has such a bad impact on the value of the token or the protocol. That's not the case. Like if we see an example of a protocol that started off rather centralized with a public offering and everything in terms of Haven, and you can see that project just turned from like the bottom up, completely change into what it is today, which is synthetics. That was done through the token distribution that they had, and which is actually a very effective one that maybe people in this community would also consider, was to vest the token holders would stake their token. Although it was the token usage is different in synthetics than it is to Uniswap, the SNX holders would vest their token and they would receive the emissions a year later. So they would stake and they'd receive their vested tokens after a year. So that's one way to bootstrap it, the protocol without possibly having a farm and dump situation that most people are worried about. But in a sense, I also think that it's still so early, and like Monet said, like it's still very centralized if we leave it as is. And I think that's part of the reason why Mateo just wants to be passive here. He wants to see what the community approach kind of is. So we kind of have an obligation to bootstrap ourselves and find more like others like us, in the sense that tokens need to be distributed, but what's the best and fairest way to do so? So you mentioned like grants to devs, which I think would gain a lot of traction if you were to bring forth a formal proposal on those grounds. I'm 100% sure what, like we just seen recently with Yearn, how their community is willing to give 50% of their protocol fees to the strategist. So I'm sure like these kind of things will pick up. I just think that in some way it has to be distributed, and it's good to brainstorm how the community sees the future of Uniswap and how we want to bootstrap ourselves in that sense.
Definitely second that. I guess we're coming up on the hour, which I think is what I originally scheduled this for. But for everyone who wants to continue discussing, we can maybe run over to like 15 past, 30 past, something, depending on how we all feel. But for anybody who needs to leave right now, just wanted to say thank you for joining us for the community call. We'll be posting a recording in the Uniswap forum shortly. And then, this has been really fun. So I'm sure that we'll figure out another time to do this again, maybe a little more friendly to our community members in Asia Pacific. But yes, for everyone who needs to leave now, thank you so much for joining, and hopefully we'll see you back next time. Yeah, anybody who wants to stay though, I guess we can just keep on chugging for a little while longer. does anybody have any other thoughts on token distribution or liquidity mining that they want to share, or any other like ideas about that?
Hey folks, I'll jump in real quick. This is Robert from Compound. So obviously, you know, there's a lot of different stakeholders here with a lot of different goals and incentives. You know, there's no right or wrong answer to this. At this point, the, you know, quote, liquidity mining is the status quo of how Uniswap works. You know, in the absence of a plan, I think maintaining the status quo until there's a plan is a somewhat, you know, virtuous approach. Inaction shouldn't necessarily cause change in the protocol. And it's so early that I do think that even if it's to reduce the incentives, I think maintaining them in some way is useful. We have months of data on Uniswap without incentives. It doesn't actually create a scientific experiment to shut them off. And I think, you know, framing it as an experiment is not useful because we have a very long history of no incentives in Uniswap. You know, most analysts here can pull all the data on slippage. At this point, slippage on a couple key pairs is basically zero beyond the 30 basis point trading fee up to any size. You can trade ETH to 3 different stable coins at zero slippage. You can trade ETH to WBTC at basically zero slippage. And, you know, I think it really should be a function of the community deciding what pairs we want there to be very little slippage on, and why. You know, I've heard WBTC, that sounds good. We should look at the trading volume for how many users want to do that flow. But that sounds like a viable pair. Having a stable coin seems extremely important because it's a very simple on and off ramp for the community. Do we need 3 stable coins to incentivize? Probably not. But I could see a compromise middle ground for the community being something along the lines of maintaining WBTC in 1 stable coin, you know, reducing, you know, incentives for other stablecoin pairs and using that as a data point. But coming up with a plan to maintain, you know, what I would call very low slippage, which is a great user experience for retail users and large users alike in Uniswap. It would be kind of embarrassing if, you know, the slippage went up across the board in Uniswap and people stopped using it. So that's just my personal view. It's not right or wrong, but I would encourage the community to sort of, you know, not let Uniswap as a user experience and product worsen due to inaction.
Can I just say I'm really glad someone like Robert came forward to say something like that, because it carries just more weight if you kind of understand what I'm saying. Like, I agree with all those points, and I think that we don't want to get a situation where you have like protocol withdrawal, like Robert said, there slippage across the board on the incentivized pairs. Because one thing, if I'm not sure if everyone noticed, but before this liquidity program, there was large ETH holders had a very difficult time of converting to stable coins. They'd have to do it through either centralized exchange. But what Uniswap offers here is really unique. It's the only exchange that has this kind of like liquidity for these pairs. I just think, to Robert's point, is there's no reason to really put the protocol through that withdrawal period just within action. I think that immediate action by the community to bring forth the proposal on this is pretty important.
I guess my key takeaway as a Uni token holder here is that it's pretty upsetting that people like Robert, who has great ideas, have to contribute, considering that he's not working on on Uniswap, and we have Uniswap team members that are, you know, listening and not even contributing, right? So I guess that's a little bit upsetting, considering that, you know, we're sort of hoping that the team should be the ones that set it forward, right? At least with the V3 and things like that, right?
I would hop in on that and just, I think my take, and this goes for, you know, this is just my opinion, but this is kind of my take on the Uniswap team's engagement, or on Compound team's engagement with Compound governance, or just kind of like core teams and large VCs in general is that I think generally they do want to contribute and they do in the background, but that there's a fear that if they like start just making all these proposals or really leading, they're stealing all of the oxygen from anybody else who would be able to step up in governance. So it's, it's like you kind of have to let governance kind of like learn stuff on its own and walk on its own a little bit.
But so
I don't
far
know.
we've seen the opposite, right? That some, I mean, or at least with the direction that the votes have been, or the proposals have been rejected. What the token holders saw was, well, in their words, sort of an attempt to steal, right, or attempt to steer the wrong direction, right. But so far we haven't seen anyone coming up and pointing the project the right way, right. I guess it's time consuming, doesn't provide enough incentives for people to do that and so on and so forth, right. So I guess the point here is that all of the suggestions and proposals where even like the guy, I'm not saying this is bad, right? But the guy who suggested the chat implementation on Uniswap, right? It's his own company, right? People are doing it only because they have their own personal incentive, right? So it here's so it doesn't seem like people are interested to step up and do this full time, steer into the right direction, right? So that's why I guess everyone was hoping for Uniswap to at least take the lead, right? Because they were the ones that we trusted in the first place and sort of voted for by getting the tokens, right?
Yeah, I guess counterpoint to that is like, let's say that Uniswap just took the lead on governance. Some, rando crypto anon like myself wouldn't have an opportunity to organize this call. So I think, you can look at it as like, oh, I feel like somebody's not carrying their weight. But I think a even like more optimistic way to look at it is that there's this huge like open space of opportunity for anybody who has some time and wants to contribute. Like there's a ton of opportunity. We haven't as a community figured out how to incentivize that opportunity yet, or like contributions, but I think that there's an opportunity to contribute to figuring that out as well. So I don't know, I feel like I'm hogging airtime here, but I'm pretty optimistic that, it's, if we look at it as like glass half full, like everyone on this call has a really unique opportunity to change how Uniswap works and, have a really, really huge outsized impact on it.
Yeah, I also agree that decentralized governance is an amazing opportunity that we all have and can seize. I would say maybe we can organize the first more decentralized funded hackathon or something like that. I always like hackathons. Like I'm a developer myself. I always like to build things, and if we maybe do something in that direction, or I would even say maybe do that after V3 is released. I think we're all waiting for V3, right? So I'm not sure.
If I may, I don't want to hog too much airtime anymore either. I just want to say, in all fairness, this call is pretty indicative of the fact that nobody really, no one has brought up any sort of self-serving or malicious idea here. So I think a community-driven proposal would carry a lot of weight, especially one that was fruitful from this call. I guess what I would like to say is I'd like to challenge first, I'd like to thank Monet Supply for organizing this call. I think it just carries more weight when someone with influence or someone that's well known in the community, has a lot of trust, organizes these sort of things. And I think it also speaks to the fact that when they do such a thing, community members step up, and once they have a platform, they will express their opinion, which is great to see. So I'd like to challenge like someone, no, I don't want to single out Robert, but people like Robert, now that he is also at Compound is a delegate, to drive forth a proposal, something that people won't view as a self-serving. I think the community can really get started on this from right after the call. And I think like coming from Compound and their delegation, I think something really fruitful will come from a proposal of continuing the liquidity.
Homie, you're unmuted. Can you mute yourself, please? We can hear you typing. Home.
Yep. So sorry. So I think a proposal brought from at this stage from the community, because it's clear that the community wants incentives to continue from this call, in my opinion. I think if someone were to bring forth a proposal now, I think it would pass, just maybe not in time for the liquidity incentives to end. But I think this call is clear that the community has to some degree would like the incentives to continue. And I think if someone of influence were to bring forth a proposal, it would pass. And also, I don't see anything that was brought up today that seems self-serving or malicious in any way.
I want to chime in on what Black and White said about the Uniswap team getting more involved. Decentralized governance is supposed to be messy and painful, and I totally understand your frustration, where you're coming from, but I think it's important that as a community, we don't confuse busyness and loads of proposals and ideas and implementations as being productive and good, because we don't know for sure that that's true. Uniswap is still the #1 DeFi protocol, the #1 DEX, the originator of AMM, and it's doing a killer job, so we shouldn't assume that we have to continue to make changes, and we definitely shouldn't look to the core team for leadership if our goal is decentralization. Our goal should be to pull power away from them and to give it to the community. So I understand where you're coming from in that frustration, but we need to make sure that we keep our eyes on the prize, which is decentralized governance and power to the token holders, to the individuals, and not the companies.
Plus one to that. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for your comment, Chris.
Monet supplied, take me off block on Twitter so I know about these calls, man.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, that's a vestige from an earlier era, but I will. Anyways, Amadeo had their hand up. Amadeo, do you want to hop in for a sec?
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay. All right. If anybody else has any other, comments they want to make about distribution or liquidity mining, feel free to hop in. If not, I guess I had one other thing I wanted to share just about something happening from the Compound community, which I thought was of interest to Uni governance. So let me just share this in the chat. It was in my agenda as well. Compound has a Uniswap market, CUNI market, and they just passed a proposal that will delegate the basically any of the market liquidity to Compound's community multisig. And then whenever there's a Uniswap vote, basically they'll have like a snapshot poll of CUNI voters to decide how they're going to vote with that liquidity. It's super interesting to me, just thinking about like how governance participation, there's kind of like different ways of aggregating stake. So I guess if anybody has any questions about this, I've been following it a little bit, or if you've been following and you just want to comment, feel free to hop in on that.
Actually, I do have a question. I think others may as well. So from what I said, if in order to vote for, let's say if you have, let's say if the Compound multi-sig brings forth a proposal, do you have to have already delegated before, or do you already have to be in that market before in the compound market and delegated before the vote is brought forth, or can you add or delegate anytime after? That's one thing I was confused about.
Yeah. So the compound C-Uni market, I think they've made a decision just kind of for like safety purposes that they're not going to make any proposals for the time being, at least. That's what they said in their forum post. Just the way that Uniswap governance works now, though, whenever a proposal is made, the system takes a snapshot at that block of everyone's voting weight. So if somebody makes a proposal, you can't like delegate votes afterwards and have them count. It's only the votes that have already been sort of like locked in at the time the proposal was made. It's a good point though, because there was a temperature check, like that initial step 1 of the governance process that somebody had made, which I'm going to drop in the chat. Basically thinking, hey, should we increase the it's a parameter that's currently set to 1 block in uni governance. It's called the voting delay, which would, whenever somebody starts a proposal, it would give people a certain amount of time to like change their votes around or delegate their votes so that they can participate. So anybody who hasn't read that, definitely encourage you to. It's pretty cool.
I personally think that this is kind of horrifying, and here's why. Because I think that most people that deposit liquidity on Compound aren't expecting their liquidity to be used in this way. So I think that most people that deposit Uni on Compound won't even be aware that their Uni is being used to vote and to influence the ecosystem. Unless Compound goes way out of their way to explain it to people before they deposit. And the second reason is because, yeah, with Compound it seems okay, but what is stopping? I mean, there's nothing stopping Coinbase or Binance or any other exchange that holds large wallets from doing the same thing, right? So and having delegates who may or may not report back to the actual owners of the tokens what they're doing with their votes. So in my opinion, I would be interested in looking at ways to stop this kind of thing from happening, not because of Compound, but again, because of centralized exchanges potentially abusing power down the road through the same exact functionality.
Yeah, it's a super interesting idea. I guess the closest like corollary I can think of in the ecosystem now is Curve, who they have smart contract whitelisting. So like only contracts that they give the nod to are able to interact with their governance. Uniswap Uni governance works a lot differently though. So it's kind of an interesting question of like, what sort of controls are possible given the governance that we have now. But definitely something to think about.
If I can react on that, can you hear me, guys?
Yes, as Mark. Yeah, we can hear you a little bit.
Yeah, Mark from Aave here. So just to give the perspective of the Aave lending pool. So the current consensus in Aave is to actually dissolve the borrowing of governance token in our pools. So the new governance token that have been added into the Aave market doesn't have the ability to be borrowed for the simple reason that most of those governance tokens are mainly used as collateral and not borrowed. So the deposit rate were quite low, and the community current consensus, it may evolve, but the current consensus is that it's not worth the risk to activate the borrowing.
Yeah, that's a really interesting approach, which is different than Compound has done so far.
So I'm sorry, I just want to get clarification. So as what you're saying is Aave is not going to, oh, I see you just posted a link there, which I'll take a look at. But so Aave is not going to follow the lead of Compound and offer voting?
Yeah, so actually Uni is actually listed into Aave, and if you check on our interface, you don't get any deposit rates on the Uni because it's impossible to borrow Uni because we believe that it's not worth the risk of governance attack. But you can use your Uni as collateral in order to borrow.
Just out of curiosity, when you talk about risk, is it risk to Aave or risk to Uni that you're talking about?
To Uni. To Uni. There's no risk to Aave in this situation, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay, so this is just Aave acting as like a good community member.
The Aave community act like that. We are decentralized.
Yeah, super interesting. I guess for anybody who is like kind of interested about like lending protocols and kind of how that interfaces with Uni governance, there's that Aave thread, and then there's that comp governance forum thread. Tune into those, and if you've got opinions, share them. I'm sure that anything that we have to say in those forums will be super appreciated. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, Mark. Appreciate that. Did anybody have any other like questions or comments about lending, pool, voting, that sort of stuff before I tie that off?
I just have one more question from Mark, just from the Aave community perspective. Was there a lot of conversation around this topic, and did the Aave community come to the conclusion collectively that having the type of proposal that Compound is putting forward with, sort of protocol level voting is bad for the Uni ecosystem?
I invite you, Chris, to check the governance thread, and you will see that there's been quite a lot of discussion, but obviously no doors are closed. So if in the future the Aave community will vote in the context of AIP, Aave improvement proposal, a binding vote of the Aave token, that might restart. But so far the consensus is to protect from governance attacks by borrowing.
Gotcha, thanks. I think it would be good to review that maybe on a future agenda, have this discussion, because there's obvious ways that we could prevent certain wallets or contracts from voting. And if we agreed as a community that in certain cases it makes sense to block voting rights on a certain established contract like the Compound C-Uni contract, I just feel like we should explore all of those different options.
I'm not sure if there's too much community need for that. I'm not sure that I've not heard that before so far anyway.
Also there's no like technical, there's no technical way of achieving something like that. And the team or the exchange or whatever, they can always create a proxy contract or something like that and use it for voting. So I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, I think that whether or not it's possible, it sounds like maybe it would be like very difficult. But I think that that's definitely a worthy topic of discussion going forward. So like next time we do this, definitely it'll find itself on the agenda. We didn't talk about this, but I know that people have had thoughts about letting people who have like Uni deposited in the Uni ETH pool being able to vote. Kind of a different topic, but I think it's just like thinking about like how the Uni governance system works on a technical level, and what sort of design choices are really possible for us to make as a governance community. We're coming up on half hour past, so I think just kind of in the interest of keeping this concise, let's wrap this up in just a couple minutes. But if anybody has any like final thoughts they want to share, please, hop in now and make yourself heard. All right. Well, sounds like we're good. Thanks everyone again for joining for Uniswap unofficial community call. I'll be posting a recording of this in the forum shortly, and yeah, we can figure out when it'll work for all of us to do this again. But super excited and super optimistic for what we're going to be building going forward. But yeah, thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your Thursday.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.